Russia's President Vladimir Putin is in India for the 23rd annual summit between the two nations. This is the first trip to India since the Ukraine war began in 2022. And Putin's presence in India has been hailed as a big boost for bilateral ties, and major announcements are expected in this summit. After Putin's ceremonial welcome this morning, the Russian president sat down with the Indian Prime Minister. They held talks at the state guest house of the Prime Minister, known as the Hyderabad House. And during that meeting, the leaders also touched upon the topic of the Ukraine war and of the peace negotiations that are currently underway.
एक्सेलेंसी पिछले दिनों विश्व समुदाय के सभी नेताओं से जब भी मेरी बात हुई है और उन्होंने जब विस्तार से मेरे चर्चा की, मैंने हमेशा कहा है कि भारत न्यूट्रल नहीं है, भारत का पक्ष है और वो पक्ष शांति का है। हम शांति के हर प्रयासों का समर्थन करते हैं और हम शांति के हर प्रयासों के साथ कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर के खड़े हैं।
And the Indian Prime Minister's statement was appreciated by the Russian President. He thanked the Indian Prime Minister for the special personal attention that he was paying to the Ukraine war and also his attempts to find solutions for the situation. But the Ukraine war, however, wasn't the focus of this bilateral. New Delhi and Moscow wanted the summit to forge stronger bonds, especially in the field of trade, tourism, counterterrorism and international diplomacy. India and Russia have laid out an economic roadmap up until the year 2030, and the leaders have signed multiple MOUs for various industries from shipping to healthcare to science and food safety. And they also touched upon a partnership in critical minerals as a means to balance global supply chains. India will also soon launch a free 30-day e-tourist visa for Russian citizens. Meanwhile, both nations have reaffirmed their commitment to preventing and countering terrorism in all of its forms. And the Indian Prime Minister has now made it a point to condemn the terror attack in Pahalgam on the 22nd of April and also the attack at the Crocus City Hall that took place in Moscow on the 22nd of March back in 2024.
पहलगाम में हुआ आतंकी हमला हो या क्रोकस सिटी हॉल पर किया गया कायरतापूर्ण आघात, इन सभी घटनाओं की जड़ एक ही है। भारत का अटल विश्वास है कि आतंकवाद मानवता के मूल्यों पर सीधा प्रहार है और इसके विरुद्ध वैश्विक एकता ही हमारी सबसे बड़ी ताकत है।
And also the Russian President Vladimir Putin hailed trade ties with India and highlighted the 12% surge in trade turnover, bringing it to about $64 billion American dollars. And he further added that he thought that India and Russia are up to the task of getting the overall bilateral trade to a figure of about $100 billion. President Putin also spoke about India and Russia's historical energy ties and has promised that they will continue uninterrupted.
Partnership between Russia and India. I would like to point. We are also seeing successful partnership in energy. Russia is a reliable supplier of oil, gas, coal, and everything that is required for the development of India's energy. We are ready to continue uninterrupted shipments of fuel for the fast-growing Indian economy.
And that last statement comes even as India is now facing some punitive tariffs from the United States over its import of Russian crude oil. And after the summit, India and Russia have released a joint statement. It has been titled India-Russia Time-Tested Progressive Partnership, Anchored in Trust and Mutual Respect. Now, all the points of discussion were summarized in the statement, and some new ones were also highlighted. One such example is that Russia has reiterated its support for India to get a permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council. And Russia has added that this should be a reformed UNSC and not the one that we have at present. Now, another major point in the joint statement is that both Russia and India have stressed upon the need to send humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. And both nations have also voiced their concerns about the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip as well. And after the meeting at the Hyderabad House, the two leaders attended the India-Russia Business Forum. And this was at the Bharat Mandapam in New Delhi. And once again, the two leaders stressed on the goal to achieve $100 billion in terms of annual bilateral trade. And the Indian Prime Minister also went a step further, insisting that ambitious goals can in fact be achieved even before the 2030 target date. And WION's Dharamjot Kaur has sent us this report. Listen in.
The two-day India-Russia Business Forum just concluded at Bharat Mandapam here in New Delhi. Now, the biggest takeaway has been the $100 billion trade mark that has been set by both countries, a target which they aim to achieve by 2030 in the next 5 years. Now, India-Russia bilateral trade value currently stands close to $70 billion, so we're looking at a $30 billion increase in just the next 5 years. Now, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of mutual understanding in terms of not just increasing cooperation and trade in existing industries, but also introducing new industries into the mix. There has been talk of introducing more private players in the defense and space sector for India-Russia bilateral ties. There's also been talk by the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi of providing Indian labor, skilled and semi-skilled, to meet not just Russian but also global requirements at the international level. How new industries come into the fray, how more business players enter this entire trade promise that has been mutually agreed upon by both countries, that is going to be something that will be keenly watched, not just by Russian and Indian stakeholders, but also by Western stakeholders, especially the United States. Here at Bharat Mandapam in New Delhi with video journalist Ajit, this is Dharamjot Kaur for WION World is One.
All right, now joining us on the broadcast, we've got Ambassador Arun Singh, the former Indian ambassador to the United States. Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for joining us here in WION. Now, this is a very important summit that's happened in New Delhi. The Russian president and the Indian prime minister have said that the trade relationship between India and Russia can go up to $100 billion by the year 2030. In fact, the Indian prime minister said that this is a target that can be achieved even before that. Do you think this is an easy target to achieve, considering that $52 billion was the quantum of the oil trade that India and Russia had just last year?
No, I'm glad that both leaders have paid more attention this time to the economic and trade dimension of the relationship, because traditionally in the India-Russian relationship, the defense aspect of cooperation has been strong. Last few years, the energy part of the partnership has increased. Because of the global energy situation, Russian oil has been available at discounted prices, even within the framework of Western sanctions. And so India imported fairly significant amounts of that. But the civilian economy trade relationship has always lagged behind. And for years and decades, both governments have made an attempt to increase that. So I think it is to be welcomed that there is a reinforced focus. Trade, if you take away the energy, as you mentioned, is still only about $20 billion. And it's possible that the energy part may come down, because two Russian oil companies have now been sanctioned directly, Rosneft and Lukoil. And it may become difficult for India to buy significant amounts from these two companies, because you will not be able to pay in dollars or euros. The Western countries would block that. And you don't want accumulation of significant rupee reserves. So given that, I think you will have to move much more into the non-energy trade dimension. So the business delegation is there. They've spoken about looking at newer areas in electronics, technology-related areas, agriculture. So long as both governments focus on that, explore new opportunities, and I think special effort has to come from Russia.
Ambassador, I also need to ask you this, because this is a summit that's taking place in a certain geopolitical context, which is clearly in a state of flux. The United States would be watching this summit very, very closely. And in your assessment, how would Washington be responding to the fact that India and Russia are forging such strong bonds?
So it is a continuation of the strong bonds between Russia and India, because if you look at the nature of the visit, the articulation that has been done, areas of cooperation that have been identified, you can make the argument that it has been a continuation of where the relationship has been for several decades. It's just that both countries have resisted slowing down or walking back under the adversarial gaze of some other parts of the world. China would have an adversarial gaze, Pakistan would have an adversarial gaze, US and Europe would have an adversarial gaze because of their own difficulties with Russia at the moment. So I think the signal from India is that even as India values its relationship with the United States, values its relationship with Europe, because as you know, the leaders of the European Union, European Commission would be coming to India on a major visit in January. So even as it does that, it will not step back on the Russia relationship where it sees it to be in its own interest. So I think basic message is an assertion by India
Right.
of the strategic autonomy of its decision making. And that's how it should be understood.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Ambassador Singh, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you.
उनकी यात्रा ऐसे समय हो रही है जब हमारे द्विपक्षीय संबंध कई ऐतिहासिक माइलस्टोन के दौर से